So here goes with 6 tips for learning English as a foreign language. So the first learning tip is the same as my first teaching tip. You cannot be taught English as a foreign language. You cannot rely on a teacher to pour all of the information into your head. I've said this before. What does it mean for the student though? It means that the student, here's the first tip, must take responsibility for their learning. They cannot transfer that responsibility onto the teacher. Well, is this a sort of like an advertisement for bad teaching? No, the teacher has to do his job as well, but the student must take responsibility. What does this mean? It means that they need to know what they need to do in the language and why they are studying it. Some people call it motivation. In a sense, they have to learn to grow up. They have to learn to grow up and, as I said in one lesson, throw away the crutches. When I said that, it caused quite a sensation. Like, throw away the crutches. Don't rely on other people for you to teach you the language. You've got to learn it. So it really means, this is the second point, the second tip is that you need to actually do what you want to do in the foreign language. So some people say that you need to indulge in your hobbies in your foreign language, so that if you like gardening, look at gardening in English. If you like computer games, play computer games in English. So I've had seen some very strange motivating factors to learn English. Comedy videos was one. And very recently I've started teaching a student who loved jokes, and he was bringing me jokes from old Playboy magazines. Wow. But this was great for his English. It was really what he wanted to do in English. So this is an important thing to understand. Do what you like doing anyway in your chosen foreign language. The third point is really very obvious about learning a language, but I'm very often asked this. How do I learn a foreign language, namely English in my case, as quickly as possible? Okay, fair question. The answer is go to an English-speaking country and learn it. Just live there. In whatever way you can, just spend at least 6 months living in the country of your chosen language. The most important thing to remember when you're in a foreign country learning a foreign language is do not speak your own language. So that if you're Russian, have no contact with Russians when you're speaking English in an English-speaking country. So my own experience taught me this. I went to the Dominican Republic and learned Spanish. No one spoke English around me when I was out there, and I learned how to speak Spanish very easy. I'm now in the situation where I'm learning Russian, which is a much harder foreign language to learn for English speakers anyway. And actually, I'm not in this situation. I'm not in this situation where I am avoiding English all the time. I'm speaking to you in English. I speak in all my English lessons in English. I work in English. I actually spend most of my time currently speaking English. It means that even though I live in Russia, my Russian is developing very slowly. Much more slowly than I would wish, ideally. But anyway, essentially, the quickest way to learn a foreign language is go to the country where it's spoken. So The fourth point about learning a foreign language is to establish appropriate aims for yourself. An unfortunate truth about learning a foreign language is that some people are better at it than others. Some people actually can go on to speak English, for example, as a foreigner, much better than others. Some people constantly make mistakes and they never really get out of this way of speaking. So for some people, to aim to speak like a native speaker is perhaps an appropriate goal, but not for very many. I can speak a lot more about this, but I'll just leave it at that for the moment. But what about the 99% of people who are never going to speak a foreign language like a native speaker? They need to speak the language in the way that they can speak the language. They need to speak their own version of the language as well as possible, so that there is Russian as native Russians speak it, and there is Stephen Garratt Russian, which is rather different, but I'm getting better at it. So I think that a lot of students need to understand this. And whenever I get asked about speaking English perfectly, which is a very dangerous word, or speaking English as a native speaker speaks, I say, look, you've got some serious thinking to do. You need to ask whether you really can do it, or are you going to settle for some attainable level in the language? If you do that, then you will feel better about it. It sounds like a very negative piece of advice, but I think for the psychological peace of the individual, it is important to know what you're really trying to do in your foreign language. Tip number 5 is, are you going to work in your foreign language, or are you going to be content with not working? So, now what the hell does that mean? So my way of thinking about speaking a foreign language is that it is best to learn a foreign language in as painless a way as possible. I don't like pain when it comes to learning a foreign language. I like to do it as easily as possible. I like to hear and to copy and to absorb. I like to respond to real problems in the language. But at the same time as I'm doing it like this, I sometimes question myself, well, are you actually learning as much of that language as you possibly could? Or should you be doing more? Should you be reading in your foreign language? Or, heaven forfend, should you be writing in your foreign language? Most people find reading and writing in a foreign language harder than speaking and listening. Speaking and listening is is great for an instinctive understanding of the language, and I think that's really important. But for some people there is more work to be done to go higher in the language. I do actually approve of it. Learning Russian, one of the major impulses for me in learning Russian is to read the great classic authors. I do it a lot. I've become quite good at it actually. My reading knowledge of Russian is much better than my speaking ability. So you need to ask yourself, are you going to just learn passively, or are you going to give yourself a little bit of pain and work hard? It's for you to answer that question yourselves. So the sixth and final point that I want to make about learning a foreign language is that you need to develop your internal policeman. So this is a rather strange phrase that I use, but it means you need to develop the correctional ability to assess your performance in your foreign language as you are speaking it or as you are writing it. What form does this take? So you need to have some idea of how you intend to speak your foreign language, how well you want to do it, and how correctly you want to pronounce it especially. And then you need to develop the ability to actually apply it, to actually change the way in which you are speaking to a more satisfactory sound, say. So it's half conscious and half unconscious. It doesn't really work if you're only going to do it consciously. This means that you have to remember to keep your internal policeman active all the time. So it needs to be partially conscious and partially unconscious. So I had a very good example of this in a student whom I was teaching last year in one of my university groups. I pointed out a couple of pronunciation mistakes that she was making, and she lost her cool completely and said, "But this is terrible! This is terrible! I must never make these mistakes again." And I said, "How are you going to make sure that you don't make these mistakes again?" And she said, "I have a little voice in my mind which constantly tells me to speak English in the correct way that I want." And I said, "Fantastic, that's exactly what you need." And not very many people know that they have this facility, and not very many people can therefore use this as a tool in their learning. But I think it's a really important aspect of learning.